Hola everyone, this is Chaz Aegis with another Rantervations, and I'd like to introduce you all to the very well-known, fabulous, incredible Miss BeastlyEevee.
Oh, come on, just keep inflating my tiny ego and ease inflation.
Let me get my bicycle pump and start, going up and down, and inflating.
That just sounded like an innuendo.
Okay, folks, so today, this is an off-the-cuff rant. We really didn't have any intentions to do this, but it was just sparked by an article I read the other day. And essentially, it's going to be about the happiest topic in the world, death. Actually, it's really not about death itself. It's not going to be any sort of existential discussion. It's really more about people's reactions to it, especially if you are someone who's had a close one die, regardless of the circumstances. But it always ends up being a very awkward, difficult topic.
Always seems to be like that, particularly when somebody makes a comment or something like that, and then you may have to state, well, so-and-so is no longer here, or something along those lines. It then becomes incredibly awkward for the other individual because they go, it's almost like a step-by-step process where first it's surprise, then it's either shock or embarrassment or even shame, and then it's completely like awkward moment, and then the person becomes incredibly weak, even if they're the loudest, most rambunctious person around.
It's as if they think they've done something wrong by asking about someone, and it turns out they died. And it actually annoys the hell out of me, to be perfectly honest. But to put it in context for you folks, it's been about 5 or 6 years now since my mom died. She died of a heart attack. It wasn't completely unexpected. I knew at the time she was dying. She was swollen with edema. And it was our last Christmas with her. And I was lying to myself. I was just like, okay, Mom's going to be okay. She didn't end up being okay. She did live through Christmas, enjoyed it with us, it was the last one, and only lived 5 days into the new year. And I'm okay with it. I do miss her a lot. It hit me a lot harder when my grandmother died because my grandmother raised us. It wasn't due to divorce or anything. It was just a very weird family situation. But Mom and Dad were very prominent in our lives. Even so, as part of conversation, getting to know each other, inevitably it always ends up leading to somebody asking about my mom. Or maybe I mentioned something, sharing a story about her or whatever. Then I end up stating the fact that she died a few years ago. And the reaction's almost always the same. Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm like, well, I am sorry about it, but first off, if my mom had survived, she would have had a colonoscopy bag on her intestines, on her stomach for the rest of her life. Trust me, she would not have been happy living like that. She was a very active, independent woman. Her health wouldn't have been that great for the long run. And she would have still really been suffering due to her health issues. But even that aside, it's like, I know I'm lucky because I was an adult when she passed away. Same for my grandma. I was an adult when she passed away as well. And it just ends up annoying the hell out of me because it's like, okay, I understand you're trying to be sympathetic, but first off, Mom's been dead for a while. I do miss her, but secondly, I'm sharing a good story about her. So it's not a terrible thing that you asked and it turned out she died. She was worth knowing even after she's gone. It took me a while to figure it out, but that's really why it annoys the hell out of me. This is partially why I asked Miss Evie, and I'll let her take over this part to explain why I wanted her part of this discussion.
So, many people don't really know this online, but a lot of people more in real life. I lost my dad a few years ago. More recent than child losing her mom, but nevertheless, granted, he was not as big a part of my life as, say, my mom is, because he had to move away to another state, so I couldn't see him very often, but still, he and I were very, very close. So, watching him slowly die of cancer was not a fun, happy, fun time thing to do. And I was an adult as well, just in college, before I think I got my associates. Still relatively young, but I was at least not in high school anymore.
And do you find that when it does come up in real life conversations that it just gets awkward all of a sudden? You know, you're just having a conversation, sharing a story about your dad, and then all of a sudden it was just like, oh, I just had something weird. It looked like they're asking about your personal sex preferences. It's like that kind of awkwardness.
Oh, yeah, I mean, I noticed that, like, didn't really notice that in the beginning, like, after my dad died, where it's like the first year you don't notice it because, well, it's recent, the pain's still there, very, very fresh. The condolences can at least make sense. But after now 3 years, it's like, okay, well, he died of cancer. First of all, it's not your fault. I mean, yeah, you're sorry to hear that, but I think I'm a lot better now.
And it wasn't like they turned around and was like, I have cancer in my hands. Here, catch! It's not that kind of thing. It's not like they sneezed and boom, suddenly you had cancer.
Exactly. Yeah, you feel in the beginning sort of awkward on bringing up the conversation, having been on the other side of the conversation where I asked about somebody and found out they had died. It's like, ooh. Because at the beginning you're wondering, like, is this recent? Did it happen? I didn't mean to bring it up. Is it a wound I'm poking at? I didn't know it. I mean, I get that. But when somebody says it's been a couple years now, I think you should not be afraid to talk about the individual. Just keep an eye on their expression, how they're looking at you and reacting and such, you know?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Well, here's a couple of instances that I'd like to share that one was really annoying as hell. The other one actually did have me in tears. This was when I was still working at Penny's, okay? One woman, I think, if I remember correctly, she said she was in her 60s. And she was wanting to buy a new pair of shoes. She was going to take a trip. She mentioned she was going to visit her mom, who was in a nursing home. Her mom was in her 90s.
Wow.
And I kid you not, she started crying on me in the middle of the damn floor. I don't know what I do without my mom.
I feel bad now.
I'm like, I'm sorry to hear that. But as long as you're going to see her, it was a little awkward, but not for the typical reasons. I was kind of pissed afterward because I'm thinking, you still have your fucking mom. She's 90 some damn years old. Be glad you had her for this long, lady. You're how old and you still need your mommy? What the hell is wrong with you? She probably isn't even all there to even give you any sort of damn advice. She's probably lucky to be able to tell between a fart and a poop at this point.
That would be mean.
I know it's mean, but it's just like from the perspective of someone who did lose their mom. But I'm like, you're going to stand there in front of me, pretty much start bawling on me because you don't know what you do if you lose your mom. And you're in your freaking 60s. I'm like, oh my god. And I know that's like a bit of an extreme example. Annoying just scratches the surface on that one. I didn't feel any sympathy at all for the woman, and I probably should have, but again, this is from the perspective from somebody who had, in fact, lost their mom. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, no. You still have your mom.
I can relate in the sense of when I hear somebody bad talking their dad, it's like, bitch, you still have your dad. I don't.
Yeah, it would be nice to have your dad around so you could bitch about him, you know?
Yeah, it's like, I have more sympathy towards the people who never had a dad in their life than people who are like, oh, my dad's there, but he's such a brat, minus the abusive ones. Those are obviously the outliers.
No, absolutely. But it's still a case of you still have your parents, regardless of how horrible the relationship is. And normally the ones with bad relationship with their parents, at least I found from my experience, they don't really react with this kind of awkwardness.
Yeah.
They really don't. Death is definitive. Death happens. And it's like, yes, you would rather have the people there. But if somebody dies, maybe there's an afterlife. Maybe we're reborn. I don't know. I don't like getting into those discussions because it's like, there's no definitive proof. And whatever's going to happen happens. We just know that death is a definite. There's no avoiding it. No ifs, ands, or buts. I guess a lot of people just can't accept that portion. And because of that lack of acceptance, that's why it's just so awkward when that comes up. But as I mentioned earlier, was related to an article I read a couple days ago about this woman. She writes parenting articles, and from the indication in the articles, I saw this on Yahoo. She has about a 2-year-old little girl. And she was at the park. Her little girl was playing in the sandbox, and another woman asked her if the girl was her oldest. She was honest about it and said, no, my oldest died in infancy. And it led to that same awkwardness of, oh my God, she lost her child. What do I say? The woman had a very good point of view on this. She said that I don't mind talking about my son. He had a short life, but I was so happy that I had him, however briefly. And it's the same for my mom. I was lucky I had her for my life. There were lots of good times. There were definitely lots of bad times. My mom could be a real pain in the ass sometimes. But that's what moms do. Yeah. Dads as well. They can be a real pain in the ass. We all can relate on different levels. Otherwise, they were worth knowing and they're worth remembering. So why should it be a bad, awkward thing? It's like, you were surprised that they died. Okay, understandable. But hey, if you don't mind the awkwardness or can get over that, how about I tell you a little bit?
I love talking about my dad. I mean, that's, to me, it's like good therapy to talk about him because then I can still remember him.
Mm-hmm. And you remember a lot of things you bonded with him over? I mean, didn't you tell me that he's the one that got you into fan fiction?
Oh, yeah. He was the one who got me into fan fiction.
Pokemon too, wasn't it?
No, but he enabled me very much so.
The Pokemon enabler.
He bought most of my game.
And it's those things that make them worth knowing. Their sense of humor, even if they were pain in the asses, that's just part of who they are. I know I can be a pain in the ass.
But I still love you.
Thank you. I love you too. Another story I wanted to share was this other gal. This was the one that actually made me cry. I mean, I'm seriously. I'm not someone who easily cries. I will easily cry if someone tells me a sad story about their dog dying. I will feel sad for kids, don't get me wrong, I'm not that heartless, but it always hits me harder when it's the animals, particularly doggies. Always, that will guarantee to get me. Pathetic, I know. But this woman came in to buy a pair of Clarks, and they are well made, tend to be comfortable, but still $80 for a pair of shoes can be pretty pricey for a lot of people. And really didn't have the money for it. Where I work, if you apply and you get approved for the Pennies card, it's changed a little bit, but at the time you got a 20% discount. That even applied for Clarks, because any other sale coupon did not apply because they were high-end shoes. They also happened to be display shoes, so I was able to get away with giving her another 10% on top. That aside, she didn't have her ID with her, which was weird because she was driving, but she forgot it. So she needed to come back the next day when I was working again. And so I had to take her to a register out of my area. Our registers were crapping out. So we're over there, and I was talking to her. She needed the shoes to attend court because her 7-year-old granddaughter died in a car accident because her asshole father, who happened to be an ex-con, was running from the police because they were trying to arrest him on a warrant. So asshole thought it was a really good idea to take off with the kid in the back, rolled the car. He survived, she didn't.
Look.
Yeah. And she was going to court because her daughter, sad to say, the drugs were more important than the kids. And she already had the 15-year-old son, who was obviously from a different daddy. They had custody of the little girl, but the father got visitation rights. The little girl was with him at the time the police tried stopping him. And they had called off the chase. I asked her, because she's telling me this story, while I'm going through this whole process of doing the application and ringing her up. And I got through it with no problem. When she left, there were a couple other associates at the register quad that I was at, and one was asking me about it. And I was starting to tell it, and I actually started crying on the floor, so they had to hand me the damn tissue box. And I typically don't. I've heard all sorts of stories working as a shoe associate. I was very sad for her because of her granddaughter, but at the same time, I think it really helped. She was fine talking about it. I think she wanted to be able to share the story. And I think that's the underlying theme, and that's why the article triggered this thought for me. You want to talk about people you care about, even if they're not here anymore. Granted, sometimes they're assholes. Like my great uncle. When he died, yeah, I cried for him too. I loved him. But the reality was, he was an asshole.
It's one of those things when it comes to when people who've never experienced it before, they immediately become awkward and wonder, is it a bad thing that I bring this up? And, when you have experienced the loss and you're talking to somebody who else, it's like almost this connection of empathy. It's like, oh, I know this feeling. And of course, you're more paying attention to how recent it was to tread carefully if it's really, really recent. You don't want to open up any fresh wounds. Mm-hmm. But, if it's something more distant, then you feel like you can more freely talk with them.
And you can connect with them. And as you stated, you understand where they're coming from. It really does help to be able to talk to them.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about them.
Definitely does talk about it. Even in some moments where you get a little teary-eyed and you're just, your voice gets all stuffed. It's like, oh, I can't, I'm getting the feels now and stuff like that. I mean, I've had that for 2 years where talking about my dad gets me sort of feelsy and it's like, I need a tissue box.
I'm a little verklempt.
But it gets better after time, and when you're approaching somebody and you find out that a particular individual you mentioned to them is dead, don't feel so awkward talking with them about it. Talking about the individual actually helps them move on. It does wonders, because it's like, you can tell somebody these things. You're opening the door for them to let out their feelings. Even if they do end up on the floor all messy and teary-eyed, it's like, at least you're letting them vent.
Exactly. And if they weren't comfortable with it, they wouldn't admit to it. I can't remember very specific examples, but I have known of people who basically just flat out lie about somebody, whoever the dead subject is. Where the dead body is, that they will outright lie as if they're still alive. And that's somebody who's really not coping.
Yeah.
But anybody who's just honest about it, they're willing to talk about it. And it's not a terrible thing if you stumble in it. Majority of people will tell you, I'm sorry, I can't talk about it right now. Even if the person was murdered and all that, it's good to share the story. Because that way someone else knows. Maybe somebody else can learn from it. Aside from understanding it, maybe they can even relate to it.
Yeah, it's one of those things of don't be afraid and feel bad and awkward. First of all, you didn't kill the person, so don't feel bad bringing them up on accident. You didn't know. It's not your job to know. It's not like we're expecting you to know every dead relative of ours, so if you shouldn't mention them or what have you. No. You will tend to know if it's a sensitive topic by the person's expression. If it is, just apologize for bringing that up. Don't apologize for them mentioning, oh, so-and-so is dead or something like that. Don't feel bad about that. It's not your fault. You didn't kill them.
Exactly. And if you did, if you weren't in jail, I'm sure that person would be probably wailing on your ass. Dude, I would. I'd be like, oh, you have teeth. Here, let me help you with that. You don't need them anymore. You get to drink your food for the rest of your life.
Astronaut food. You're giving them the opportunity to become an astronaut.
There you go. And apparently it's good rations that they get to eat.
Space monkeys!
That's too funny. But it is true. It does tend to be a very awkward, difficult subject for people. And it's not. I mean, both of us were sharing with you guys right now very personal stories. I'm certain there's a lot of other people out there who can definitely relate, but it's not so bad. It's okay.
Yeah.
And the majority of the dead people were worth knowing.
Yeah, definitely. So do not be afraid to bring them up. We don't mind one way.
Not in the slightest. So that's just a little rantervations that I wanted to share with you guys. And I knew about Miss Evie. I think your dad died like about 6 to 8 months after my mom died, because I sort of dropped off after my mom died.
That's true, you did.
Yeah, I didn't talk to you for like a year. So I just couldn't bring it up. I was talking to you at the time my mom died, but then I just sort of like disappeared on you. And then when it came up, your dad had just died like 2-3 months before. Which made me feel like shit, but not because her dad had died, folks. It was because I had just, like, dropped off and didn't look at her damn fucking PM for months. Because I just didn't want to feel compelled to have to talk to her because I wasn't ready, and then I look and I'm like, fuck.
It's okay. I still love you.
I still love you too, and you were really cool about it at the time, but damn it, that don't make you feel like shit, trust me. We picked up like really nothing happened, and I think for a bit we kind of tacitly agreed to avoid. Both of it was like we both knew, we just didn't really talk about it. Then as time went on, then it was just the reminders, share these little stories that we would tell about it, and because it was related to whatever topic we were discussing at the time. And then it became easier to talk about. So just remember that, folks. It's okay. It's okay if it turns out somebody died. It's okay to ask how they died. You can certainly say, well, how are you doing? Are you doing okay?
Yeah.
People do appreciate that. I personally find incredibly annoying when people say, I'm so sorry. Like Evie said, you didn't kill them. But secondly, it's just really doesn't strike me as genuine when people say that. It's like, I know they're sincere. I know it is. It's my own thing. It just doesn't feel sincere, and it just annoys the ever-loving shit out of me.
Please don't hate me, senpai.
But seriously, I don't mind people asking me. And if it is too much for a person, it's like, okay, well, if you ever feel like, if you know them well enough, assuming it's somebody you just haven't seen in a while, you can certainly say, well, if you feel like talking about it, I'm all yours.
Yeah.
And it'll be appreciative. Like, the person probably will not actually talk to you, but they would appreciate that. To me, better than say, I'm so sorry. If it's immediate, yes, it's appropriate. Within, I guess, a year. But when you're dealing with 4 or 5 years out down the road,
yeah. It's like, no, it's okay. You can ask about it. I'm not gonna slap you in the face. How dare you bring them up?
It's true. It's just baffling to me how awkward it is. I guess it's just for a lot of people, it's very difficult to confront.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah. And they probably can't, at that point, deal with it themselves, either because they have no experience with it. I guess it's a lack of knowing how to react. It's not terrible. If someone's talking about it, it's okay.
Yeah, totally.
Well, I guess that's really all we can really say on it. Now unless we're going to dredge up, which I'm not, articles and research shows.
Yes!
All for research any other time, but this was just an off-the-cuff conversation we just decided to share with you.
Yes.
Okay. Any final thoughts, my dear?
Nope. All I gotta say is, research, motherfuckers, research!
Take that as what you will, folks, and adios!
Bye-bye.
Boom, 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 boom. Now tell me what you gonna do when it ain't nowhere to run. When judgment comes for you. When judgment comes for you. Tell me what you gonna do when it ain't nowhere to hide. When judgment comes for you. See you at the crossroads, so you won't be lonely. See you at the crossroads, so you won't be lonely. See you at the crossroads.